different kind of show. We've got some guests who are going to give you a kind of different perspective and share with you some things that perhaps you have not considered before. That was the breakup song. That's our theme song, and we're breaking up with fear. And so, I just want to welcome you in. Come on in. I'm pouring a different kind of tea today. Today is a hibiscus blend. It's delicious. So come in while I'm pouring the tea and fluffing up the pillows. Come on in and get comfortable. And I hope things are going well. This is the last Saturday of January, if you can believe that. This month has zoomed by. I don't know quite what happened, but it's gone by incredibly quickly. I know it was probably the longest month on record for the 800,000 folks who were furloughed from the federal government, but that has now come to an end, thank goodness. And as of Monday, everybody will be returning to work for at least the next 3 weeks, and we'll see what happens after that. But that's an interesting dichotomy too. We're talking about no fear, and then having the fear of your income suddenly taken away from you. And this is supposed to be the most stable job that you could get, is working for the government. So that, I know, produced a lot of fear in a lot of people who were, even if they were prepared financially, it's not a comfortable feeling to have the rug pulled from under you, quite literally. But today I want to talk to you for a bit about where we're going in terms of our companies and in terms of even government as well, in the diversity and inclusion space. That's an area that has received a lot of attention. And, if you're not in that space, you might think that, oh, that's all over with, when you think of some of the rhetoric that's on the media. You would think that diversity and inclusion is kind of a, DOA, dead on arrival. But I'm here to tell you that that's actually not the case. It is an area that is very much alive and kicking. And I have two guests with me today. I want to introduce them to you and bring them on and have them talk to you a bit about their backgrounds and how they got in this space and sort of their perspective on things as well. With me today are Chris Armstrong and Vince Brantley from Veritas Culture. My mother was a Latin teacher for over 40 years, and I know she would be beaming. She's beaming in heaven right now. Anybody who's got Latin in their title, she would be very, very happy. But they are both diversity executives and certified coaches, and they do a lot of work in that area. So let me not belabor this, because I'm very anxious to hear from them. Let me bring them in. Chris and Vince, are you with me?
We are. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for giving up a little time on a Saturday afternoon to chat with us for a bit. I'm so pleased that you could join us. But just to start off, Chris, if you could talk to us a bit about your background and how you got into diversity, and then I'd like to hear from you too, Vince.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Armstrong, thank you. So a little bit about my background, I'll be quick about it. I was a federal employee up until about last October, and when I was in the government, I moved up fairly quickly, became an executive very young. I only say that to say, because of that, I've had several years of sort of observing how people are treated. I remember sitting on panels and, somebody would come in and get interviewed, and when they walked out, we wouldn't talk about their credentials. We wouldn't talk about how well they interviewed. We would talk about how long her nails were, or whether or not we could afford to bring her on because she was pregnant. Or, I remember having discussions about planning Women's History Month events or Black History Month events, and just hearing how people reacted to it. In some cases, it would be, oh, here we go again. I guess I'll go. And you would see people, or I would see people sitting in the front row as if they really supported it, but knowing that we just had a conversation an hour before where you didn't even want to come to this. So I started paying attention to that fairly young in my career, and it really sort of woke me up to how bad things can be, even if on the surface it looks like we support it or it looks like it's getting better. So I really got into diversity and inclusion, took a lot of jobs in that area while I was in the government, and it's really just opened my eyes and really led me to want to do it full time. Over to you, Vince.
Okay, Vince Brantley here. I represent Newark, New Jersey. That's where I was born and raised, and not in the most diverse of communities, you could say. And so when I joined the Army back in 1990, it was really my entrance to the world and all the cultures therein. And as my career progressed and I became a leader and then a senior leader, it's the kind of thing you can't ignore, how people are treated and how some people treat you. And rather than attack people, I often would inquire. That was my approach, just to try to understand, why do people feel as strongly as they do? Where do those emotions and those accusations or allegations, where do they come from? And so as I became a very senior leader in an organization that had about over 18,000 people in it, it became more and more important that I was able to ensure that my message was inclusive, and to focus on bringing people together as opposed to feeding divisions. And so that effort right there is really what got me into culture and diversity and inclusion. I began to take classes in it, ultimately becoming certified in it, and my goal was just to help people to communicate with one another.
Well, thank you. Now, it sounds like you both were on parallel tracks, sort of, looking at the same kinds of issues. But how did you all end up together?
So we were both senior leaders in the same organization, and we would sit on a lot of panels and especially a lot of diversity panels we got asked to. And there was a panel we were both sitting on. And to put it bluntly, in a lot of cases when we would sit on those panels, there would be other seniors on the panel. And in a lot of ways, the seniors would make the responses and the panel about themselves. They loved sitting on it, but maybe for the wrong reasons. And we could feel that in their responses. And so I sat on the panel, and Vince sat on the panel. And I think, based on how we looked at each other, literally, we both were sort of surprised that here was somebody at the senior level who was not making the responses about them, who wasn't responding with surface, pleasing answers. Like one of my favorites is when you ask somebody, how do you think we're doing with diversity? And their first response is, I think we're doing well, but it could be better. Sort of vanilla responses. Vince was one of the only people I'd ever met who was very honest about it, very authentic, and more importantly, the workforce responded to, because you could see how they heard him differently than they might have heard other panel members. So I just wanted to get to know him after that. What would you say, Vince?
Yeah, pretty much the same. At the time, Chris was already in leading in the diversity, inclusion, and the culture space, and seeing his ability to navigate a very diverse audience, but yet keep the topic in mind. Like some of those panelists, they weren't even listening to the questions. They were just using the question as an opportunity to talk about themselves. And Chris would answer in a way that not only acknowledged the question, got things back on track, but also was very careful not to alienate the person who had failed the opportunity to answer it in the first place. And I thought, this is the kind of guy I like to work with, I like to grow with. and our friendship soon followed, and a partnership thereafter.
Let me ask you a question. You both referred to panels that you sat on. What kind of panels were these, Chris?
Chris? Well, I'll take the question.
Okay, all right.
We did a number of different panels.
Mm-hmm.
The one that we're talking about in particular was actually about women in the workforce. And so to have two men sitting on that panel was already challenging enough. But it was our perspectives and our willingness to listen that really made a difference in the overall outcome of the panel. But we've done several panels, all in the areas of culture and diversity.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to get to culture in a minute, because I see that as kind of where we're going, you know. But let me ask you, what made you decide to leave government, which up until 34 days ago was a pretty secure kind of job, and strike out on your own?
Well,
that you can keep going.
I'll take the first swing at that. Government is it's awesome in that there's so many people brought in from all different walks, and it's not it's different because these people aren't necessarily coming together because they wanted to leave where they were and come where they are. Some of them, that the government moves you, and so it's a very challenging environment. What can be limiting about government is that based on whoever's the supreme leader at the time, you can find yourself operating under conditions where you have to be very careful about the truth. And so Veritas is all about truth. It's all about getting the ground truth. And as a company, what we have the ability to do is discern very quickly whether senior leaders in organizations who call upon us are serious about what it is that they're trying to achieve, and whether they're willing to be a part of that change, or they just want to see a change for their own benefit. As our own organization, we can say this isn't really for us, or we're not really for you. And in the government, you really don't have that option. Not to mention the fact, when you really find your passion, the government doesn't do a good job of keeping you within your passion, because the government has its own progression. And so when I found this line of work, when I found the chemistry that Chris and I have, it just seemed like the right thing to do so that we could stay in that space and build. Chris?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. For example, if you're a good scientist, if you're working for the government, you get promoted up, and eventually you have to manage people. And, if you're, I'm just using scientists as an example, but if you're in that space, you may not want to deal with all the things that come along with managing people. And I've heard complaints from managers, like, I don't have time to, really deal with this person's performance. I just want to do my job. I just want to deal with what's in the laboratory. I don't want to deal with this stuff, So I think that kind of goes along with what you're saying, that there are some things that become part of the job that you may not have really counted on, and when you initially came on. Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Yes, I mean, when I joined the military, I didn't even know that I had a passion. I didn't join to find a passion, but when I found it, I knew I couldn't stay there, and that's the hard part about it. Like, I love the military, I love the government, I love the people, but if you know that you can't stay in a place, you have to keep moving. and you have to meet the needs of the government, not necessarily the things that you may be best suited for. Yeah, government's not really good about talent management.
Yeah. Would you talk about that a little bit more? Because that was profound what you just said. You know, when you found your passion, you knew you couldn't stay there anymore. And I think there are a lot of folks who are either trying to find their passion or they're kind of compromising on their passion because, you know, they're in a comfort level, you know, and maybe going to where their passion really is means, you know, less money, or it means moving. And, you know, so how do you make that jump? How do you get past those things that are comfortable for you to really pursue your passion? What's that driving force that has you say, I don't care about the money, I don't care about, you know, where I have to go, this is what I have to do?
So before I answer that, I just want to acknowledge, I think Chris is somehow muted. Is it?
Oh.
He can't talk. That's why he has silences.
Okay.
Is there any way that, on your end, Chris?
Not, well.
I think it's unmuted now. I just heard something say unmuted.
Okay,
great. Okay.
All
right.
And now,
welcome back. Glad you're back.
So
sorry we lost you for a little bit, but passion, you know what?
I trust Vince. Yeah. All trust. Go ahead, Vince.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It is good to have you back, Chris. I thought for a minute you were testing me, but to answer your question, so I think before, and I can only speak from my own experiences. Before my passion, I really had to become aware of my purpose, like the place where I just fit. You know, like I found the thing that I can do every day and not get tired because it makes sense. I'm making a difference. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I learned about the government was that the government really doesn't pay you for those qualities that you bring to the table. That may be the most magnificent quality. You may be the best networker in the world. The government is planning you to be an administrative assistant.
Uh-huh.
And so, although your ability to network is absolutely part and parcel to your success, it absolutely catapults you forward. The government is paying you to be an administrative assistant. It's rating you. It's evaluating you on being an administrative assistant. And so if you really want to stay in that purpose and find your passion, the thing that really, you know, you don't even need an alarm clock. You just wake up excited about the day. You got to be ready to let that go. And with that comes the stability. And that, you know, I know that, you know, you started out talking about fear and letting go of fear. A lot of that has to do with fear. You know, you have to jump. You have to let go of the wall. You know, you gotta actually exit the aircraft if you're gonna fly. You know, and
wow,
it's not an easy thing. But your assurance is that if you stay where you are, you'll never know what it is to live in the clouds.
Wow, I love that. I'm writing that down now. You have to exit the aircraft if you're going to fly. That is really so profound. And I think that is the tension that many folks feel, you know, and I'm talking about people in the government space, you know, who, you know, really, you know, and the system sort of encourages you in a way, you know, to make it easy for you to get a mortgage, and, you know, you become tied to certain areas, you know, because of that. So it becomes harder and harder to, as you say, exit the aircraft, you know. So let me see, where am I going? That was so profound. I don't even know what I want to ask you next. Part of it, and Chris, now that you're back, maybe you can answer this. Oh, you did tell us how you all got together. You were sort of working together, and then you decided to come together and form a corporation. And what's really the mission of Veritas Culture Incorporated?
See, I would say we have really two missions. So one is to assess cultures and help improve cultures. And we're very big about doing both of those things with the workforce in tow, meaning we do not have a vision to go into an organization, spread our wings there, stay for 2 years, build up the need to have Veritas, but really get in, do the assessment, and get out. But part of the assessment is bringing the workforce along. In other words, if you look at culture as collective regard, which is what it is, you have to actually invite the collective to, tell you what the culture is, no matter how much of an expert you think you are. But more importantly, you have to invite the collective to start figuring out how to fix the culture. Because once we leave, our dream literally is for the workforce to be the people who carry it forward. We don't tell a client, okay, we did the assessment. Now guess what? you're gonna need us for another 2 years to execute it. So that's one mission. The other mission is to explore and resolve diversity and inclusion issues, but you can probably guess it's with the same thing in mind. And the last thing I'll say about it is we really want to focus on root issues. So for instance, in the diversity inclusion space, we tire of the term unconscious bias. It exists, but after a while it becomes a cliche. And we get to just keep saying, oh, well, it's unconscious bias. So we want to focus on why is it that after 19 years of mandatory training every single year, we still have unconscious bias? And if you want to bring us in to do unconscious bias training, okay, maybe. But what we really want to do is make the unconscious conscious. So that's sort of our mission, is to change the face on which we address culture and diversity.
Wow. Now that's interesting. Now, what do you say to the people who, and I'm sure you hear this, oh, we have to do that again? Why do we have to talk about this stuff? Why do I have to hear about, Indian rights or Hispanic rights or Black? What about my rights? What about where I am? I feel discriminated against every day. What do you say to that person? Well, do you ever hear that, first of all? And then how do you address that kind of an issue?
So I would say that the first thing is we never teach anything. We always facilitate. So even if we're asked to come in and teach a class where people would potentially say that, and they do, we facilitate. And what facilitation allows us to do is get in front of it. So the first thing we're going to ask a group of people is, why are we here? And they're going to say everything from, well, because we were told to be here, to, well, I guess we have a diversity problem, to, well, this is diversity training, to a few people saying, I want to learn something. So then what we start doing is we start getting in front of the people who say, oh, I was told to be here. This is stupid. We'll just ask questions. So why do you think you're here? I understand that, you were told to be here. Why do you think that is? And we're very good at unpacking. So when someone says, look, I was told that I don't hire enough people who don't look like me, but I'm here to tell you I hire the best qualified people. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Okay. We'll just ask some basic questions. I want to know why you think it is that you always hire the best qualified, and yet the best qualified almost always happens to look just like you. And then I want to help you unpack as an individual, what are those things you might be looking for that may not make you a racist, may not make you a sexist, I said may, but may make you somebody who's just comfortable with people who were all former Army. I'm only willing to hire former Army people. So I remember Vince doing a session, and Vince is former Army himself, and somebody said, well, unless they're former military, they can't do what we need. And Vince just said, okay, what are the skills that the former military people had? And within 5 minutes, he got them to see a side-by-side list of, first you said all former military, then you said you just need these qualities. What if these qualities were put in a vacancy? Do you think you'd get applicants who weren't former military? So it's that approach. It's the get in front of it before it comes out, but really do it from a facilitation perspective so that we're not talking at them, we're talking with them, and we're literally trying to figure out where they're coming from before we just judge their statements.
That is so key. I think you both have really hit on something that can really change the world. literally. Because I've heard similar kinds of things. I did a training not too long ago where an employee said that he basically only hired from one college, because he said, I've worked there, I went there, I worked there, I know the caliber of people there, and that's what I look for. And they all happen to look like him. And, so, you're getting in front of it, and not accusing the person, because that's a hot button issue. Nobody wants to be accused of, bad behavior. But by demonstrating, and really pulling it apart and giving them an opportunity to, kind of save face and recognize what they're really asking for, in a really organic kind of way. I think that is really, and it also assumes good intentions, by doing it that way, as opposed to blaming and, naughty, naughty, naughty. You're assuming that the person's intentions are really, really good. So I think that's a wonderful tool, But let me ask you, for people who are not in leadership positions just now, and say there's someone who's listening to us right this second and listening to our conversation, and they say, well, that's great, if you're in a position to make change, but I'm a, GS 11 or 12, I'm at the lower end of the totem pole. What would you say to that person about their role in diversity and inclusion and culture change? Which I want to unpack that a little bit more too. But what would you say to it's someone who's listening right now? Why should I care about diversity? I'm not hiring anybody. What's in it for me?
You go first, Vince, and I'll pick up after you, Vince. Go ahead.
I would say that every 15, every SES that you see in a leadership position, every 14, every senior leader that you know, how'd they get there? They once a 12 or 13, and if they were, and you don't see them making the changes, why do you think that is?
Mm.
So if you want to be a person who's if you recognize that there's a problem or there's something that needs to be done, don't fool yourself into thinking that when you get the rank or the position, you're going to be able to do it if you haven't already been doing it. If that hasn't already been a part of you, it won't suddenly become a part of you. Those positions don't give you anything you don't already have. And so your conversations today are what are going to feed into your actions when you get there. And the only way we're going to arrive at the change that we seek is by people having the passion and the determination and the will actually getting into the position. So if you want to be that person, you got to start being that person today.
And the only thing I would add is, go ahead.
No, I think that's key, that, you, in order to be it, you need to demonstrate it, first, and it doesn't come with the title. That kind of sensitivity doesn't come, the sensitivity fairy doesn't come and tap you on the head when you become a leader. That's something that you have to have acquired way before then. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is look at the movements today. So culture, first of all, people don't want to hear this, but diversity, inclusion, and culture. Leadership doesn't define or drive that, right? It is social norms, it is collective regard. And what's being proven out by the movements we see today is if a workforce doesn't like where a leadership is going or where a country is going or where an organization is going, like Hollywood, for instance, they are not afraid these days to put their mouth where their money is. It's not the other way around, because they don't have the money, but they put their mouth where the money is. And what's happening is leaders are having to now adjust, which I think is a good thing, by the way. They're having to adjust in a lot of ways. The workforce is who defines the culture. They're going to determine how leadership views diversity and inclusion. They're going to determine how much leadership cares about project X or event Y. And again, the movements are proving that out. And if you believe that it works the other way around, that I can only do something once I'm in that position, then don't be surprised if nothing ever changes, because as long as leaders don't have to adjust, they're not going to. Mm-hmm. And what used to happen up until a few years ago is we would adjust the leaders. We would look up and we would say, okay, I want to sit in that, throne, or I want to take that position, so I have to be different. We would talk to the women about this all the time. Women would adjust and they would say to me, well, if I don't adjust, I'm going to be labeled a B word. That might be true. But as long as you adjust, I never have to. I can keep acting the way I act because you're adjusting to me. What they're finally seeing now is I don't have to adjust, because the more of us there are demanding equality, demanding change, the more leaders have to respond, even if they don't want to. We get a lot of calls from leaders who want our help, and we know the difference between authentic desire and litigation. So somebody calling us because there's litigation, or they feel like they have to do something, we're going to tell them right off the bat, let us bring your workforce along the way. That's, like I said at the beginning, they're the people that are going to determine your culture. You're not. And when they come to you with recommendations on how to improve diversity, you better listen to them, because if you're going to spend this time and they're going to waste their money, or spend this money, waste their time with us, the worst thing that can happen is they come to you with great ideas and you do nothing about it. I think it's powerful, the movements, and I think people need to see the movements as a contradiction, a good contradiction to the notion that you have to be somebody in a formal leadership position to do something to make change. That's not where we are anymore.
Wow. That's powerful. Well, you know what? The first half an hour has just whizzed by. We need to take a brief pause for station identification. And when we come back, I really want to unpack culture and how culture impacts diversity and inclusion, and where you see us going from here. It was civil rights, and then EEO, and then diversity and inclusion, and now there's culture. And I may have missed something along the way, but where we're going to go from here. So we're going to pause for maybe a minute or two, and then when we come back, if you would address those issues, we will look to hear more from Chris Armstrong and Vince Brantley in just a few minutes.
Oh, fear you don't own me. There ain't no room in this story. And I ain't got time for you telling me what I'm not, like you know me. Well, guess what? I know who I am. I know I'm strong. And I am free, got my own identity. So fear you will never be welcome here. Is there anybody out there just like me? Anybody needing fear to leave? If you don't know how to say it, sing along with me. Sing, fear you don't own me. There ain't no room in this story. And I ain't got time for you telling me what I'm not, like you know me. Well, guess what? I know who I am. I know I'm strong, brave, and I am free. Got my own identity. So fear you will never be welcome here. Whoa. Goodbye, goodbye, fear. Whoa. You will never be welcome here.
The Tea Time with Carol. We're here today with Chris Armstrong and Vince Brantley, and having a really interesting conversation about diversity and inclusion and culture change, and which is kind of a timely topic today. This is the first day the government is now reopened after a 34-day, I believe it was, furlough. And so before the break, I posed a couple of questions, and Chris and Vince, I'll leave it up to you which one you want to tackle first. And I'm really interested in your perspective on, where you see diversity and inclusion going in the future.
So I think there's two things. I think one of them is where it's going, and the other is where it should be going. And Vince, which you want to go first? You wanted me to go first? Up to you, bro.
I'll if you don't mind, I'll take.
No, not
I'll
at all.
start with where it's going. You pick up on that, and then we'll just kind of build on each other here.
Yep.
So where is it going now? If we're not careful, it's going to go where every other effort has gone. It's loud to the point that it's numbing, to the point that it becomes redundant, to the point that it becomes boring, and we lose our interest until the next incident. And then it resurfaces and we begin again. I think when they added inclusion onto diversity, there was a spark of genius there. Because diversity is having a seat at a table, but inclusion is having a voice and having that counts. And inclusion is a lot. It's a lot harder to overlook. Because you know when you don't have a voice. You know when people are tired. You know when maybe your stats look right, but your stomach doesn't feel well about the way things are going. And that awareness is key. But if we're not careful, we'll keep using that same, that same repetitive message, and we'll lose what it was we stood to gain from it. Chris?
Yeah, to me, and Vince and I talk about this all the time, there's a head and a heart discussion here. So the head says, I know our organization doesn't look the way it should from a demographics perspective. The head says, I know that it's wrong to use particular words or to touch people in particular ways. The head says, it's easy to hear the rhetoric of politicians and, famous people and know that they're racist or that they're sexist. That's what the head says. And it's very objective. It's very binary. And we have to deal with, sort of the results of that. Where the heart is coming in, and to Vince's point about if we're not careful, on one end of it, someone will say, and they will have a right to say this, that we have to take drastic measures at times because we can't keep taking baby steps. There's absolute truth to that. And there's some people who love the baby steps or no progress at all. So let me acknowledge that. But in some cases, because we're tired of baby steps, because we're tired of lack of progress, because we're tired of looking up and still seeing, white heterosexual able-bodied males in almost every seat, we have resorted to putting our heart above our head. And in some cases, a lot of the work we end up getting to do, especially crisis work, is we have to go in because people can't even talk to each other anymore, because the people who want to see the change, who want to push equality and diversity and inclusion towards the right end state, they're tackling it with such gusto, with such force, with such heart, they've completely lost anybody who was in the middle. Forget about the people who don't even want it. So we have to figure out how to change the conversation and balance the head and the heart, not to slow down progress, but to actually get progress. Because as Vince used a word that we think is so powerful, and that's numbing. It's becoming numbing. The division is numbing. The messages are numbing, and it stands to lose any message. So that's where we see it going. It's picked up such steam so fast, and with so many people, that there's now two sides and there is no middle.
Yeah. If I could add one thing.
Sure.
Chris often speaks of the C3 problem, where you first you see it. First you got to get someone to see it. Then to see it as a problem, and then to see it as their problem to solve. But where we are today is we have forced people to see it.
Mm-hmm.
We force people to see it to the point that they can't unsee it. It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the movie theaters.
Mm-hmm.
People are changing roles so that it looks more diverse. They're doing rewrites of things that were great. They're changing roles to make it more diverse because diversity is important. You see it more and more. You can't unsee it. It's everywhere. And at a certain point, you just stop listening because it's just so repetitive, the message that's coming at you. Where we need to be is seeing it as a problem. And that encompasses understanding the impact of not having diversity and inclusion. And finally, we have to get to seeing it as our problem to solve. What is our individual role in creating a more diverse and inclusive culture? If we don't get there, we won't get anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And it is difficult, because I've noticed the proliferation of buzzwords. I've noticed like on social media, and these are people that I think are good folks, and some of them are friends of mine, but I've noticed, and they're from a culture that's different from mine. And I've noticed that there's a tendency to, they don't post themselves, but they repost something, and there's a tacit understanding that they're agreeing with what the person is saying. And it may be, I'll give you an example. The young man who was here in the Washington area with the from the Catholic Boys School in Kentucky, and this young man confronted a Native American elder who was, actually trying to resolve and diffuse the situation, and he was beating a drum, and the young man stood right directly in front of him with what was interpreted as a smirk. He came out and said he was just smiling. He was trying to help to diffuse it, even though he had a MAGA hat on. But he indicated, and there's such a rush to justify that young man's actions. And so I've seen a lot of posts from other folks who are saying, oh, what a shame that his intention was misinterpreted. And I think if you're on the other side of that equation, you still see the smirk. The fact that he said that he wasn't smirking, the fact that he said, I was within my rights. He gave this very well-rehearsed interview about what he had done and why. And nobody seemed to question it. It just kind of got a pass. And now, all of a sudden, the media was wrong and there was a rush to judgment and, the whole thing. And so I'm saying all that to say that that privilege exists and it's real. And I think that makes the conversation more difficult when you have incidents like that, or another one where, when you've had these mass shootings in schools or churches and the assailant is a young white man. Well, when it's a black man, they end up very frequently not making it to the police station, but the young white man ends up not only there, but stopping at Burger King for a hamburger before he's taken to jail. So it's those kinds of things I think make the conversation more difficult because people are reading the news, they're hearing these stories, and so I think it makes our jobs more difficult. How do we have the conversation when we're on such opposite sides of what actually happened? And how do you reconcile that in the workplace?
I think what you said earlier about assume positive intent is where we have to start. So, your point about the teenager who was wearing the MAGA hat and explained, as you said, what his intentions really were. Regardless of what side of the argument someone is on, it has become habitual for us to what Vince calls listen to respond instead of listen to understand. And what we were able to, here's what happened. Because we responded, whoever the we is, whether you're on the Fox News side or the CNN side, the Trump side, the Pelosi side, whoever is in the listen to respond mode automatically goes for, says whatever they say based on how they already felt.
Mm-hmm.
And if this were a work conversation, if Vince and I were facilitating a discussion at work, which we do all the time, and someone would have brought this situation up, the first thing we would have said was, how do you know? And it didn't matter if their opinion was that it doesn't matter whether their opinion was that he was misunderstood or that he's the racist. How do you know? When we teach classes, we show people pictures. And we say, we're not going to tell you our opinions about the pictures. Just tell us your opinions. And you would be amazed, or maybe not, at how many people look at a picture and automatically rush to judgment. And as long as we rush to judgment, we will never be in a situation where we can put ourselves in the shoes of the person on the other side of the discussion. And even if we are right and they're wrong, if we rush to judgment, we're just as wrong. Because we made an assumption without giving them any assumption of positive intent and without hearing from their side. So they get to look back at us and say, you didn't listen to a word I said. You made your decision as soon as you saw the picture or whatever. And that is where we are as a country. And that's where Vince said earlier, there is no middle anymore. You're either on one side or the other. So people have to listen to understand, which also means they have to bring genuine curiosity. And Vince, that's your thing, man. You can talk a lot about that.
Yeah, just genuine curiosity is just, it's not listening to make a point or to trap you, but to be, when you're really interested in what it is they have to say and why it is they're saying it. Chris talked about the pictures that we'll put up. There might be sayings under the, quotes from the person. And I can tell you that if it's Pamela Anderson, they'll go negative quick. If it's Donald Trump, they'll go negative quick. But the point is that when I say, well, what if we took those pictures away? Just read the statement. Could you agree with the statement? Oh, yeah. But Pamela Anderson said it. Well, does that matter? Have you not prevented yourself from being informed, from being more understanding because you allowed an image to point you in a direction? How would you feel if someone judged you by the color of your skin or the uniform you wear or the city you came from or the amount of money you make or the occupation you have?
Now that's so powerful and so key. And images are powerful. So how do you do that? How do you go back a step and not make a judgment based on that image, which is powerful? You're seeing this image of a young man standing there with smirk, smile, jury's still out, whatever. How do you look at that image and not make a judgment about it? But how do you maintain that genuine curiosity? How do you get there, actually?
Part of it is knowing yourself.
Go ahead, Vince.
You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, part of it is...
I want to hear from you both.
Oh, yeah. We're passionate about this. The part of it is, the first is, and you said it earlier, you have to assume positive intent, first and foremost. And the second is, you have to ask yourself, do I know the person or do I know the people? So Vince uses the phrase, those who don't like to be generalized tend to generalize more. So we see a kid with a MAGA hat, and we think of the MAGA hat, we know what the acronym stands for, we know the person who started it, we can't stand the person who started it, so anybody who befalls that person, anybody who wears something that represents anything that person ever said might as well just be like the person. You have to turn off that generalization. You genuinely have to turn it off, and the only way you're going to turn it off is if you can assume positive intent. One of the most powerful things I've ever heard is somebody saying, I finally realized, and this was Van Jones from CNN, who I love, but anyway, he said, as soon as he realized that not all Trump supporters are racist, now he didn't say they were all great people, he said some of them were ignorant, which isn't the same as racist, But he said, as soon as I realized that, I could listen to them differently. But he had to get past the initial notion that anybody who voted for Trump was a racist. And he said, in some cases, they're ignorant. In some cases, they don't have as much of an education. And I'm not labeling either. I'm just sort of repeating what he said. I have to be able to look at somebody. I had a son who passed away because a nurse fell asleep on him. This is a true story. It would be easy for me to look at any home nurses and say, they're all irresponsible. And there are people who say to me, how can you ever trust a nurse? Because I can't generalize. I'm not going to assume. And in fact, the person who fell asleep, I don't even begrudge him. Have people fallen asleep on the job? Yes. Did he screw up in a major way? Yes. Has he thought about it in the 20 years since it happened? Absolutely. Does he need my hatred? No. But I have to trust that he's a good person. He did a stupid thing. We have to have that trust before we're going to extend and bring in the genuine curiosity. We have to have it. What would you say, Vince?
No, and you set me up very well. So that what Chris just said about his experience with the nurse, that really dovetails well into knowing yourself, knowing the things that cause your internal triggers. Like, I know how I was raised. I know my mom. I know what she taught me. I know my dad. I know what he taught me. I know what their parents taught them. I understand that. So when I'm in a situation, I don't jump to conclusions about how my initial response might be. Or I don't easily jump to the point that I'm absolutely right, because my upbringing is flawed. And because I can see my own flaws, I'm able to accept flaws in others. More so, I'm able to look beyond flaws to see what the person's really trying to say. And so knowing who you are and how you became is a big part of it.
I think that is probably the most profound thing that has been said during this whole hour, that we really have to start with ourselves and seeing, it's real easy to see the splinter in somebody else's eye, and we miss the log